One of the most immediate signs is falling. That's going to bring on several different challenges. So if there's a fall, that could suggest not only mobility issues, but neurological things that could be going on that affect their balance. When you start to fear for your parents' safety, that's a good time to start asking the questions. What do we need to be looking at for the long term?
Welcome to Metcalf Money Moment, the podcast. Unlock financial clarity and confidence with expert insights to achieve your goals. Hosted by Jeb Graham, Ethan Hutchison, and Eric Wymore. Each episode offers decades of combined expertise in wealth management, retirement planning, and more. Join us for practical strategies to inspire your financial journey. Now your hosts.
Welcome to Metcalf Money Moment podcast. My name is Jeb Graham, here with Ethan Hutchison and Eric Wymore. And we have a special guest, Brad Haag, today, who is the owner of A Place at Home, which is a home health care. What would you call it, Brad? A home health care?
I would call it a home care agency serving those who need assistance in their house. You're right. It's a home health license, but we call it home care.
There you go. Well, very good. So how's everybody doing today?
Doing well.
Good.
Awesome.
Well, very good. Well, Brad, we thought that this would be super valuable to our clients to have you on, as we have, in our client base, we obviously have a lot of clients that are themselves aging, as well as we have a lot of clients who care for aging parents. And I feel like, they'll ask us questions, and for sure, I feel like there's a ton of confusion out there about, what different options you have, how you fund it, what does it cost? Is it going to bankrupt me? Is it going to bankrupt them? All the things that people worry about and think about with long-term care. So maybe you could just start by telling us a little bit about A Place at Home, and then we can kind of get into some of those details.
Sure. No, thank you. And thanks for having me and considering this. The senior focus topics are highly relevant to not only our community, but the families you're serving as well. So A Place at Home, we are what's referred to as a non-medical home care company. And even just the confusion before with home health, it is falling under the state guidelines of a home health agency. But the difference between what most people think of or don't understand, home health is typically a skilled nursing service that will come in to somebody's home and provide the clinical services that are necessary and then move from that patient on to the next patient. So it's a fairly quick in and out, but with a very specific purpose, with a clinical aspect in mind, clinical treatment. With home care, we are basically going in and assisting anybody who wishes to reside in their home but would require some assistance. So whether that's the watchful eye for family to feel good about mom or dad being safe at home, the help with dressing, help with transitioning from bed to bathroom, bathing, but we'll also go to the degree of light house cleaning, meal preparation, running errands, taking the clients on their whether it's doctor's visits, running errands with them, or even what we really like is doing the fun activities. Let's not just dismiss all the hobbies and fun times that mom and dad would want to have. So whether it's taking them to a show at the new theater in Overland Park, or getting them to the grandparents' games. Jeb, you've seen me in action with that.
That's right.
So it's kind of like, anything that helps somebody stay within the comforts of their home and safe, we're providing those services, and it's customized to anybody's needs. If there is the opportunity where mom or dad transitions into assisted living or memory care, there are times when we can follow and provide the additional assistance, certainly within that transition of living. But even if it's more of a long-term thing, it's really just customizable to what anybody needs for their comfort. And, it's not just about keeping the client safe and satisfied, but it's also relieving the family of, the perceived burden, or just allowing them to do the things they need to do in this busy lifestyle.
Sure.
Yeah, Brett, I was going to ask, just out of curiosity, what kind of credentials? I mean, are these CNAs that are in home? Are they nurse practitioners? What's kind of the credential of the assistants?
Right. So with state regulations, they have to be certified. And that could come from either the state regulated certifications with home health aid, or many of the employees, the staff that we have are CNAs or CMEs. They have their credentials. Now, for us as a non-medical, we're not delivering the skilled services that a licensed home health agency would be, but there are agencies that are out there that do that. So if there was somebody in the predicament of looking for home care plus some skilled services, that's available. That would be an aspiration of mine, simply because my background in healthcare, I had a unicorn experience working with, a medical device manufacturer, where I had a blended team of business development plus a team of nurses and physicians working with me. So, that's where my passion for patient care came in. And so anything is discoverable for these families, but specific to mine, it would be those types of certifications that have to be audited by the state, that have to be regulated by me. And that's what you would get with a certified home care agency.
Yeah, and and as Jeb mentioned here in the beginning, we have a lot of clients that are, they're at their retirement years, and they have some parents that are starting to age, and we begin that process. Maybe you can kind of just start from the beginning. Like, what's a good way to start? What are some good questions that they need to ask? Ask their parents, or ask a provider like yourself. What's just a good way to start the process?
Well, the one thing I would say is everybody's predicament is going to be different, right? If you have parents that maybe live here, but the siblings are out and about different states, I mean, that's very common in today's world. So they may not see the signs of decline, or understand the challenges that their parents are going through every time they go to a physician. And, the one thing I would say is trying to get eyes on the parents' paperwork, and that goes back to even just what does their power of attorney paperwork look like. I found, just doing this daily, I recently found with my own parents, their POA paperwork was more than 20 years old. Their attorney that set it up was really listed, other than each other, as their own decision maker, and that man had retired. So that would be an example where myself, my brother, couldn't help if there was a situation, didn't have the decision-making power as power of attorney over healthcare in making the right decisions on the fly. So a good place to start is just, reviewing the paperwork, seeing what you have in place, and then understanding, are there any changes that need to be made before you're caught in a situation of despair. Typically it is going to be that visit, or that fall, or something that is taking a parent to the hospital. And then that's where you're thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So there are a lot of options out there, and it all depends on what somebody's circumstance is. But helping to connect those dots within the medical community is going to be, paramount.
For sure.
If somebody's in a situation where they're going to need assistance, if they're returning to home, or if they're going to be staying in a rehabilitation hospital for a length of time, that's when you start to prepare, what do we need to do for hopefully a short term, or, start thinking about these things in the longer term. And that's when, taking the advice of the physicians or the case managers, or surrounding yourself with, what I always say, senior focused experts. And Kansas City is one of the most collaborative cities I've worked in the country, where the senior focused experts really work well together. They help one another. And it's really touch and base to find out okay, what is mom or dad going through? How do we prepare? And what's going to be, again, not forced into a quick decision that's going to have a long-term impact, but can we make some arrangements here to kind of give ourselves some time to look at the long run?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. I'll tell you too, and we always talk to our clients about this, is I feel like, when you're talking about making sure people have their POAs in order and stuff like that, that's just kind of simple estate planning, right? You put that together when you go to an attorney to do estate planning. And I think a lot of people maybe hesitate to do that just because they think of it as this big, long process. They've got to hire an attorney. It's going to be expensive. And I will say that has changed a little bit as far as, like a good example of that. And we're going to talk about that in another podcast later, is that we now use this system called wealth.com, which is basically an AI estate planning attorney that you can go in and you can update a POA and pay very, very little compared to what it used to be to do that. And it's a little bit, more efficient. But one other thing that I was going to ask you is, and I don't know if you have an example here, but like, say anyone out there has an aging loved one that they're kind of looking after, like what's a telltale sign that they need to start moving in the direction of either some sort of home health care, or that they can't do it on their own anymore?
Sure, sure. Well, one of the most immediate signs is falling, right? Falling, that's going to bring on several different challenges. So if there's a fall, that could suggest not only mobility issues, but neurological things that could be going on that affect their balance. Right now we're dealing with so much dementia. And, there are so many different reasons why we're seeing the aging population, succumb to dementia. And it's our population is living longer, right? And they've tied dementia to, past medications being used historically, but also so many other events that could lead down the path, if somebody has had strokes or a heart attack and survived those. That's the thing about the medical marvel right now is we have the technology to not only recognize what could come, but also how to sustain. And decades ago, that wasn't recognized, and people would pass before these things. Remember you all are maybe too young, but people used to say, well, they died of old age. Well, that's just because it wasn't recognized. There was a complication there.
Yeah, that's right.
And now,
It used to be like a disease. It
we've
was just
got
old age.
we've got the advancements to recognize what really caught and then, treat and sustain. So you see a lot of this, but if you're seeing signs of like forgetfulness, getting lost while driving, things like that, or just the mobility issues, when you've come back home for Thanksgiving or, things like that. When you start to fear for your parents' safety, that's a good time to start asking the questions, what do we need to be looking at for the long term?
Yep.
Nice. Now, rather than talking about what it costs, let's talk about how you would fund something like this. Are we talking about like a long-term care insurance policy? Is there a Medicare side of this, Medicaid? What are some levers we can pull to help assist with some of the funding as financial planners?
Right. So that's a great question because that's oftentimes what blindsides. Within home care, that is rarely covered with your typical health insurance plan. If there's something that comes along with the health insurance, you want to leverage everything you can get. So something like the home health service that we were talking about earlier, a lot of times that can be covered by health insurance, and you want to take advantage of that. Any post-surgery visits from physical therapy, occupational therapy, health insurance, Medicare, those things will be covered. Unfortunately, Medicare, unless somebody has a really unique Medicare Advantage plan and you peel that onion and find that there's a home care benefit, it oftentimes won't cover that. And, that's a big soapbox I can, stand on because the Medicare benefits are tremendous. And when you think about home health, the medications, the expensive pharmaceuticals, as well as if somebody's transitioning into hospice care. Very, very well covered. But unfortunately, Medicare doesn't cover home care at this time. If somebody is a veteran, the veterans benefits are very generous when it comes to home care. Long-term insurance policies are also very, very helpful. And that's something that what I've discovered is a lot of family members, the children, may not understand that their parents have a long-term care insurance policy in place. Now, if they're at that stage in life, it would be very tough for an aging client to get a long-term care insurance policy, but it might prompt the sandwich generation like me to understand, what could these benefits look like? So long-term care insurance policy is definitely something you want to find out if your parents have it, in fact, and then call and find out what are the eligibility parameters, what are the limits, what are the elimination periods, and that just means how much do you have to pay out of pocket before your benefits kick in. But even, in my own personal experience, back when long-term care insurance was first offered, it was like a blank check being written. And there are some very, very generous policies out there, but the perception was for a lot of folks, including my own parents, that benefit needed to be saved for a nursing home or something. And that's not the case. So long-term care insurance policy is a terrific option for paying for these services, or at least complimentary, because right now a lot of it is going to be out of pocket private pay. And that's where your strategic financial planning comes into play. Medicaid now does provide that. Each state runs differently. We happen to reside in Kansas, and Kansas is one of the lowest reimbursing states within the country, and I hope that improves. But that would not be available for a lot of people. But that is the option. Medicare is not.
That makes a lot of sense. I will tell you, so when we open up the can of worms on long-term care insurance, because we obviously have insurance licenses and we do a fair amount of long-term care, life insurance, disability, all those things. And the thing that's happened with long-term care insurance over the last 5 to 10 years is it's become crazy expensive even for somebody that's in their 50s and 60s, that's generally healthy. It's expensive. And so I think the industry has become a little bit creative in the fact that, like, now there's a lot of life insurance policies that will have a long-term care rider on there. So basically what it is, say you buy a 500,000, and this is just totally hypothetical, right? But if you buy a $500,000 life insurance policy and it allows for 20% of the policy to go toward long-term care, every year until the death benefit is drained, given that the activities of daily living is 3 out of 5 activities of daily living that would make them qualify for that. So I would say for us, the workaround has been trying to find more creative ways to get long-term care, because we're finding a lot of pushback from clients, rightfully so, when they look at the premium numbers that they have to pay for long-term care. But then when they hear about it from your standpoint, where all of a sudden these policies are there and they're coming into play and they're actually paying for a big valuable service, that's a lot more, none of it's fun I guess not necessarily fun to talk about, but it makes a lot more sense to talk about it that way than it does when they're talking about the premiums that they're going to have to pay. Right. So,
Well, and that's it. And that's kind of like just with all insurance, you don't know ever what's going to happen. I was, working with a client, 92 years old, and man, he was terrific. You would have sworn he was in his 70s. But he said one of the things that his wife talked him into was a long-term care insurance policy. He just agreed because he didn't want to go through the domestic argument. But he said that was the best thing that he could have ever conceded on. She fell victim to Alzheimer's, and he said, that policy covered about $750,000 worth of care for her. And, that's a good example of leveraging something that you've invested in, and it paid off, very, very well. I can also think of examples where somebody had the most generous long-term care insurance policy that I'd ever seen and never accessed $1 from it because just didn't understand what the benefits that could be sought out for. And, so it is about finding that paperwork, finding out what you have, what you're eligible for, and then, just always taking advantage of the things, especially when you've paid into it, just like a Medicare. I've never heard of anybody saying, I've heard of people saying, even when I worked in hospice, a man said, well, I don't want to take somebody else's Medicare benefit away from them. I've never heard anybody saying, well, I won't accept my Social Security check.
Right.
You paid into it your entire working life. You did
Mm-hmm.
the same thing with Medicare. But no, it really is taking a look at everybody's personal experience and then trying to find out, what is going to be most helpful here and now. It may not be that a home care service is needed for somebody 24/7 or even 40 hours a week. It could be identifying short shift assistance that helps the spouse who is the primary caregiver, so he or she can run their errands, to do the things for the household. They've got a watchful eye and somebody in that is providing the companionship as well as the assistance and, if necessary, the clinical, support. And then kind of mixing and matching where somebody can be available as a family caregiver or buying time to, be assisted living. So if you're looking at, how do you make this work financially, it's not just, it's either assisted living or it's a full-time home care. It's how do we make it work financially as we progress through, what it may look like down the road.
Yep.
Brad, how would our clients find you if they need to reach out?
Well, we are a place at home, Kansas City South. Our office phone number is 913-800-3738. We can be found online at aplaceathomekcsouth.com. But yeah, happy to talk with anybody and everybody. And, a lot of times it's not within my wheelhouse, but I surround myself with these senior focus experts, which will be helpful in identifying the right assisted living or even independent living community. There are senior consultants out there that help to navigate through the complexities of, whether it's updating paperwork or even a care coordinator that is a licensed nurse that can help, navigate through, connect all the dots between the physicians, the facilities, and, hey, let's be honest, a lot of that is what is most challenging for folks right now. You have patient portals, you're not getting the direct phone calls from the offices, and it's really hard to connect the dots. So if it's not something that I can help with, I'd like to help find somebody that would be the right fit to help a family through their struggles.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Brad, for coming on. I think this has been productive and a lot of good information. And we'll be, sending this out here. So thank you much, guys. Thank you. And this is Metcalf Money Moment signing off.
Thanks for tuning in to Metcalf Money Moment, the podcast. We hope today's episode provided valuable insights to help you unlock financial clarity, confidence, and peace of mind. For more expert advice and resources, visit metcalfpartners.com. Until next time, make every money moment count.
Jeb Graham, Ethan Hutchison, and Eric Wymore are registered representatives with and securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through WCG Wealth Advisors, a registered investment advisor. WCG Wealth Advisors and Metcalf Partners Wealth Management are separate entities from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly.